You've taken the land which is rightfully ours. Years from now, my people will be forced to live in mobile homes on reservations. Your people will wear cardigans and drink highballs. We will sell our bracelets by the roadside. You will play golf and enjoy hot hors d'oeuvres. My people will have pain and degradation. Your people will have stick shifts. The gods of my tribe have spoken. They have said, do not trust the pilgrims. And for all these reasons, I've decided to stomp you and burn your village to the ground.
I'd like to think that's what I would have said when the settlers first came to America. It would have avoided settler colonialism and hundreds of years of oppression and genocide for the indigenous people of our country. Hi, my name is Sarah Perdiguera, and I'm a citizen of the Tiwa tribe, also known as Yuzeta del Sur Pueblo, and a Master of Social Work student at Cal State Northridge. And today, I'd like to talk to you about settler colonialism and its devastating effects on the indigenous people of our country.
So what is settler colonialism anyway? In simple terms, settler colonialism is a social or political group of people who come to a new land and claim it as their own. They exploit the land for its value, and during this exploitation, they eliminate the indigenous people of the land so that there's no evidence of their existence. Settler colonialism is a phenomenon that has happened all over the world, not just here in the United States. Many of the world's major countries are guilty of this oppression. Russia, Britain, Spain, and so on have all had groups of their people who have colonized others at the expense of the indigenous people. However, since the first settlers arrived here in the U.S., the land for indigenous people has slowly been taken away. This visual shows the land occupied by indigenous people pre-colonization and how over time settler colonialism has took that land away. Now all that is left is reservations, and they are still being threatened today.
Now that we have a general idea of settler colonialism, let's look at it on a deeper level.
Settler colonialism in the United States is made up of three parts: the settlers, the indigenous people who inhabited the land, and the slaves who were forcibly brought into the country to extract the value of the land.
Each of these parts was very important to the overall goal of settler colonialism, which again was to maximize the value of the land while eliminating any evidence of the indigenous inhabitants. Their primary goal for eliminating the indigenous people was not race, religion, or ethnicity, but access to territory. The mere existence of an indigenous person was evidence that they stole land and are not the heroic pioneers they made themselves out to be, so the indigenous people had to be eliminated by any means necessary. Their weapon of choice?
Genocide. According to Patrick Wolf, there are three main overlapping phases of genocide used to destroy indigenous peoples. Physical genocide, which included soil epidemics, frontier warfare, and massacres. Biological genocide, which is the removal, relocation, and isolation of indigenous peoples to reservations. And cultural genocide, the removal of all cultural practices, which includes language, traditional clothing, and religion or spirituality. Another method used to eradicate indigenous people was the concept of blood quantum. The reproduction of indigenous people was contradictory to the settlers' logic of elimination, and so the blood quantum system was introduced. The blood quantum system measures the degree of ancestry for an individual of a particular tribe. The goal of the system is the dilution of indigenous blood and eventually their extinction altogether. The elimination of indigenous people was an important part of the goal of settler colonialism, but their main motive was still greed. To the settlers, the African slaves' reproduction increased the wealth of their owners because the more slaves the settler owned, the more land they could exploit, and so the one-drop rule was born. This meant that any amount of African ancestry, no matter how remote and regardless of physical appearance, they were labeled black.
Although settler colonialism is not a mainstream idea, it has had a profound negative effect on the indigenous people and African Americans in our country. While we are taught that our nation is built on positive values and heroic pioneering, the evidence is quite the contrary. We can't go back in time and prevent the negative effects of settler colonialism, but we can acknowledge this part of history and work towards healing the historical trauma being felt today. One organization that is focused on this healing is the Indigenous Wellness Research Institute.
The vision of the Indigenous Wellness Research Institute is to support the inherent rights of Indigenous people to achieve full and complete health and wellness. This is accomplished through collaboration with Indigenous peoples in decolonizing research, training, and knowledge sharing.
An incredible opportunity and an incredible responsibility to really create that safe space for Indigenous knowledge to flourish and to be circulated. All of the knowledge and the research and the theories that come out of that space are going to speak to the lived experience of Indigenous people, because that's where we're hoping that our research and our theory will emanate from, but it will at the same time be accepted by Western academia because that's where it was produced.
The Indigenous Wellness Research Institute, along with many other Indigenous scholars, have inspired me to fight for decolonization. As an Indigenous person myself, I believe the best way to challenge the effects of settler colonialism is to start by decolonizing myself as well as my children.
I have started this process by visiting our tribe's reservation and original tribal lands, by exploring my tribe's traditional clothing, language, dances, ceremonies, and foods, and incorporating them into my own life. Although I don't live on my reservation, I connect with local Indigenous people and celebrate my culture through an intertribal lens.
I also work towards fighting modern forms of settler colonialism, such as the Dakota Access Pipeline. I view this as a form of settler colonialism because the main focus is the profits made by oil companies while invading the land of Indigenous people. The repercussions of this pipeline will destroy ancestral sites and pollute drinking water and could harm generations of Indigenous people to come. I can't stand by and let that happen. In the future, I hope to work with my tribe to develop a holistic approach to healing that integrates traditional and ceremonial practices with Western medicine by focusing on decolonization and mental health. How will you fight settler colonialism?